Now that the bottom halves are tacked firmly in place, take the staves out of the two boxes and place them in the middle of the bottom. This helps keep the tub bottom from shifting when tapping the staves into place. The box that has the big black X in the square labeled contains key staves has 2 key staves and 4 staves with chalk lines. Keep the 4 chalk marked staves separate as they will be set evenly every 90 degrees around the perimeter of the tub. The chalk lines indicate the height of where the hoops are to be placed. The 2 narrower staves, which look like a stave split down the middle, are the key staves and should be set aside as well, as they are the last staves placed in the tub wall. Putting the staves in the tub is a 2-stage process. In the first stage, you will tap the stave so that the midpoint of the stave just touches the outer red line drawn around the edge of the tub. In the second stage, after all the staves and 2 key staves are on the tub to the outer red line, you will put the hoops on and gradually draw the staves to the inner red line. When tapping the staves on in this first stage, the crow's cut should fit snug over the tub bottom, but should not need excessive force to tap onto the outer red line. If a stave fits so tight that it can't be easily tapped on, lightly sand the underside of the tub bottom's edge until it fits on easily. Wood can swell or contract from both temperature and relative humidity, and every board is different, so this is not an unusual event. Start by placing the first stave on the seam between the 2 halves. This will keep the 2 sections in place. When placing each subsequent stave next to each other in the first stage, pay attention to the gaps between them. Ideally, there should be a gap of about 1/32 to 1/16 of an inch between each stave at the crow's cut level for 6-foot diameter tubs. Smaller tubs would have slightly larger inner stave gaps and bigger tubs slightly less. Some variation in size of the gaps between the staves is okay and to be expected, but the variability should be spread evenly throughout the tub. You don't want a bunch of 1/8 inch or larger gaps all in the same general location with other areas where the staves are tight against each other. The larger gaps will not close completely when you tighten the hoops and seat the staves. Continue sanding the staves around the tub. The use of masking or painter's tape around the top of the staves helps keep them from tilting excessively. As you stand the staves, keep checking to make sure that the gaps between the staves are appropriate. When you've completed sanding all your regular full-width staves around the tub, there will be a gap left. You will use the 2 key staves to fill the remaining gap. Before placing the key staves, however, this is the time to take a critical look at the gaps between the standing staves. If the gaps between the staves at the crow's cut level are about the same, or if the gaps are not necessarily equal but are evenly spread around the tub, you are ready to proceed with putting in the key staves. If, however, you have a bunch of larger gaps, 1/8 of an inch or larger, that are concentrated in one area, go back and reposition the staves so that the gaps are closer to the ideal 1/32 to 1/16 of an inch, and that the gaps are evenly distributed around the tub. It is far easier to make these minor corrections at this point than to get everything assembled and realize that the staves have not drawn in properly, leaving gaps that the wood cannot swell and seal. Now that you have the hang of standing the staves, it should only take 10 or 15 minutes to correct things, if it's required. The easiest approach to correcting things is to gently tap off the staves where the gaps are, including an equal number of staves, half from each side of the staves where the gaps were. Then tap them back into place so that the inner stave gaps between them are about 1/16 to 1/32 of an inch. If you have maintained the appropriate inner stave gap between the staves when standing them, the key stave should fit snugly in the last gap. If this is the case, you can tap the key staves on and proceed putting on the hoops. If the gap for the key staves is too large, more than 1/16 on both sides, or if the gap is too small and they won't fit at all, there is a little more work to do, what we call the stave shuffle. Shuffling the staves will involve the slight repositioning of the staves one by one. If the gap is too large, it is because too many of the staves are too close together. You will need to gradually expand this spacing between the staves so that the correct spacing is achieved. Begin by removing the full width stave that is immediately to the right of the key stave gap and set it aside. This stave will be installed in the last step of the process. Second, install the 2 key staves about 1/16 to 1/32 of an inch away from the stave to the left of the gap. Make sure that the flat sides of the key staves are tight together. Now you begin the shuffling process. Remove the stave to the right of the gap and tap it on next to the key staves with the proper spacing between them. Repeat the process with subsequent staves until the gap that is created is a nice snug fit for the full width stave removed in step 1. You can use that stave as a gauge as you progress to see how close you are. You may need to shuffle 8 or 10 staves or more to get the gap to the proper size. When you do, simply insert the stave removed in step 1 and you're done. If the gap for the key staves is too small, the average size gap between the standing staves is too large. Assuming there are no major gap areas that need to be adjusted by reseating a portion of the staves as described in the key stave gap analysis, you will do a shuffle similar to that as when the gap is too large. The only difference is to increase the spacing while you shuffle the staves rather than to decrease it. Begin by removing the full width stave that is immediately to the right of the key stave gap and set it aside. This stave will be installed in the last step in the process. Second, install the 2 key staves about 1/16 to 1/32 of an inch away from the stave to the left of the gap. Make sure that the flat sides of the key staves are tight together. Now you will begin the shuffling process. Remove the stave to the right of the gap and tap it next to the key staves with the proper spacing between them. Repeat this process with subsequent staves until the gap that is created is a nice snug fit for the full width stave removed in step 1. You can use that stave as a gauge as you progress to see how close you are. You may need to shuffle 8 to 10 staves or more to get the gap to the proper size. When you do, simply insert the stave removed in step 1 and you're done.